Hello, everyone. I'm Eric D'Souza, and joining me today is Catherine McKenzie. Hi, Catherine. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good too. Thank you so much for talking with us today. To everyone out there, Catherine McKenzie has been nominated for the Best Crime Novel sponsored by Rakuten Kobo for her novel. There you go. Please join us. Uh, I'll be honest, I'm a fan of hers, so I'm very happy to be interviewing her today. A quick
You don't have to
bio.
lie about being a fan. That's okay. It's not shameful.
I'm also not part of the judging committee. That's what I want to make clear. So my fandom of yours doesn't affect the judging in any way. Catherine McKenzie was born and raised in Montreal, Canada, a graduate of McGill in history and law. Catherine practiced law for 20 years before leaving the practice to become a full-time writer. I congratulated you before, but I'm going to congratulate you again. Living the dream. She's the author of numerous bestsellers and has been translated into multiple languages. And her novels, Please Join Us and I'll Never Tell, have been optioned for development into TV series, which I can totally see happening. So I hope that does happen. Her 14th novel, Have You Seen Her, will be released later this year in June. But let's start with Please Join Us.
I have visual aids.
Great. Well, let's start with, I said this to you before, your books are hard to describe because I don't want to give anything away. I enjoy them from start to finish, but obviously we have to talk about a little bit of them. I was doing my research and I saw a promo you did for Epigraph Lit Fest. And I feel that since that's public domain, you're safe to talk about those kind of things. And we're not talking or not giving away too much. So let's start. Well, let's start with your protagonist, Nicole Mueller. You describe her as being a type A personality, a lawyer, and her age is 39.
Right.
I want to know how that affects her. So let's start with the type A personality. Maybe a brief description of what type A means, but also how is that going to affect, how is her personality going to affect her decision making?
Well, I think she, like many type A's, is very organized, very driven, someone who puts herself out there. She's a litigator, and so her life is being in other people's conflicts. And I think that impacts her because she's one of those people, and this is not like me at all, actually, who had like a life list, like reach this goal by this age. And she was on her path. Everything was like tick, 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 exactly what she wanted. And then at the beginning of the book, she gets thrown a big speed bump, and that really throws her off of her game and makes her vulnerable to being approached to join this women's organization that promises to solve all of her problems.
The other fact is she's 39.
Right.
I guess the nines have this special effect of taking stock of your life.
Yeah, I think so. And I think in her case, she is seeing as what she calls her friends have all their last minute babies on Facebook. She doesn't want to have kids, but that's a choice that gets met with a lot of resistance when women make that choice. And there's a lot of assumptions about why women make that choice that come with judgment. Often like, oh, you're too focused on your career, which no one would ever say that to a man. And she and her husband had agreed not to have kids, but he is second thinking, having second thoughts about that decision. And that's putting pressure on her marriage as well, which also makes her vulnerable. So it's kind of like she knew where her life was going, and it feels like everything that she thought she knew was going to happen is now all up in the air, including where they live. Because they're about to lose their apartment. And so it's just a lot of change and uncertainty that she's facing in that moment.
I've been told that this is a hated question that authors don't like answering.
Are you about to ask me if the book is about me?
You're exactly right. Now, I'm only asking again because of that promo you gave, and you gave a little hint that actually this is pulled from reality or inspired.
No. The idea came from a kernel of reality. But as you mentioned, I've written 14 novels, And if all those books were about me, then my life would be way, way, way more interesting than it actually is. So no, it's not about me. I'm not Nicole, but I did receive an invitation to a sort of secretive women's organization many years ago. And I was vaguely thinking about joining. When you're a lawyer, when you're a partner in a law firm, you need to be bringing in business all the time. And a lot of that is, particularly in the type of firm that I was in, is through contacts. So my firm didn't have big, what we call institutional clients. It was sort of one-off files and a lot of referrals from other lawyers and people in business. And so, so I was interested in potentially joining, but I was asking questions about it, and their answers were very formulaic and oddly formatted, and so there were some red flags. And they had a couple of like experiences, I think they called them. One of them was in Utah, I think, and the other one, or Idaho, and one was in California. And I talked to my husband about it briefly that night, and he was like, are you insane? No. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know, like maybe I could write a book about it. And he was like, it's probably a cult, they're going to take all your money. And I'm like, no. Anyway, he made a good point. And the next day I kind of deleted the email, and then I got this follow-up from them, like, we saw you started filling out the application but didn't complete it. And I was like, well, that's a little creepy. And so I deleted that, and they emailed me a couple more times. And then I just kind of parked the idea in the back of my brain. And years later, like a year or two later anyway, I was talking over potential book ideas with my agent at the time. And I pitched something to her, and her reaction was just basically like, meh. And so I'm flipping kind of desperately through my idea book, and all I had written down was, please join us, email. And I was like, well, I did get this email once, and her eyes perked up. And so I ended up writing that idea, which that always happens. It's like the thing you didn't plan to write. Yeah.
Well, in this case, I think it worked out very well. Also on your website, as you mentioned, you've written, well, you're on your 14th book about to come out. Your earlier books, you describe, or whoever made your website,
I classified them. Yeah, I didn't make the website, but I did give the information. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So the early works are classified under women's fiction,
right?
Whereas your later works under thriller suspense, most of which have strong female characters. And I want to know how you differentiate sort of the two.
How do I differentiate, or how does the market differentiate? But two related things. I mean, when my books first came out, I was writing, what would now be considered rom-coms, I think. And I thought I was Nick Hornby, the female version, like the books were funny, there was a romance, like it was high fidelity, but with a woman protagonist, and she wasn't into shoes or clothes or, my first book, Spin, is set in rehab. So, they got classified as chick lit, which is what, women writing commercial fiction back then got classified in that. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. A lot of my reviews on my early books were like, well, this is a lot more serious than I thought it was going to be, or, like as a compliment often, but it wasn't, it was hard to fit into that category. And I mean, I think the difference, come back to your question, and really starting with Gone Girl and some other books, this new category, I think, started about 10 years ago, which was a lot of writers coming out of women's fiction, so with strong female characters, and then taking elements from classic thrillers, but internalizing the story. So if you think about, a classic airport thriller, it's CIA and bombs dropping and helicopters and chase scenes, and that's where the thrill comes from, external events affecting often an ordinary person or a former military-esque person. And I think what domestic thrillers, domestic noir, suspense, whatever you want to call it, did is that it took the characterization from women's fiction and the mystery plots, and it melded them together. So they're not traditional mysteries. There's no detective or even amateur detective, but there is a mystery at the heart of the story. They're usually darker stories. And I think in those original ones, like Gone Girl and Before I Go and books like that, it really was a domestic story. So it was like a husband and a wife and what was going on between them. I actually didn't, when I started writing thrillers, I often went outside the family, and I think that the genre has expanded beyond that. But that's to me the distinction between the two. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Well, let's talk about your new book. I know very little about it other than what you have on the website. So what can you tell us without giving too much away?
Sure. Well, Have You Seen Her is about a search and rescue worker in Yosemite, California. She worked there 10 years earlier, and she's come back because she's leaving her life in New York behind. And there's something going on there, something that drove her away, but you'll find out what over the course of the book, obviously. And she gets involved in the disappearance of a couple in Yosemite, and was also that sort of brings up another disappearance that she was involved in 10 years earlier when she was in Yosemite the first time. And it's mostly told from the perspective of Cassie, the main search and rescue worker, but it also has diary entries from another character named Petal, and the missing woman's Instagram posts. And it was loosely based on the Gabby Petito disappearance a couple years ago in the Grand Teton National Park. So it's not Gabby's story, but it's inspired by it, yeah. What I hoped had happened to her instead of what did. If I could put it that way, even though this is a dark story. But
there's a lot of well, even in Please Join Us, there's some scenes in the wilderness. You're obviously revisiting it now.
Right.
Did you do a lot of research for this? Because I know I see you as a city person.
Oh, no. I mean, I grew up camping a lot and hiking. So no, I didn't have to do research. A little bit on where I chose to set the book for Please Join Us. And then Have You Seen Her? My sister and brother-in-law were search and rescue workers in Yosemite for 10 years, or for 5 years, sorry. And so I talked to them a lot about, how it worked and things that they had, stories that they had from back then. And they now live close to Yosemite Park again. And so I went in there a couple of times with my sister. And then I also watched a lot of, very steeped in rock climbing culture. And so I watched kind of like every documentary there was about rock climbing. So Free Solo and The Dawn Wall and like 5 others that nobody has ever heard of, but The Alpinist, which is really good. It's about a Canadian climber. So I really immersed myself in that last year. Probably watched 8 or 9 of those. So
that's great. Well, I won't keep you any longer because I'm sure you have to work on your next book. Your publisher's got too busy, but best of luck on the awards.
Thank you.
I think we have to wait till May 25th to find out. And then we also have to wait till June 27th to read your next book.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
Thank you.